The Christmas lights were tangled again. Every damn year, the same twisted mess of wires and broken bulbs, like some cosmic joke reminding me that nothing in my life stayed straight for long. I stood on the porch of our modest two-story house, wrestling with the stubborn string of lights while the November wind cut through my work jacket. "Dad, you're doing it wrong again," my 16-year-old daughter Emma called from the doorway, her phone glued to her ear. "Mom says Uncle Paul has this system where he organizes them by color first." Uncle Paul, my sister Liz's husband, the golden boy who somehow managed to keep his holiday decorations perfect, his lawn manicured, and his McMansion looking like something out of a magazine. The same Paul who my wife Jennifer spent every holiday helping with the kids. "Your mom's not here to supervise," I muttered, untangling another knot. "She's probably already over there making sure Uncle Paul's lights are perfectly aligned." Emma rolled her eyes. "You know Mom only goes to Aunt Liz's to escape this dump, right? Uncle Paul actually listens to her. Maybe that's why she spends every holiday with them and not you." The words hit harder than the wind. I turned to look at my daughter, really look at her. When had she become so cruel? When had I become the family joke? "Thanks for the pep talk, kiddo," I said, forcing a laugh that came out hollow. "Nothing says happy holidays like your own kid wishing your wife would leave you for your brother-in-law." Emma shrugged and disappeared back inside, leaving me alone with my tangled lights and darker thoughts. 22 years of marriage, and this was what I had to show for it. A daughter who saw me as an embarrassment, and a wife who found every excuse to be somewhere else. My phone buzzed. Liz's name flashed on the screen. "Hey sis, let me guess, Jennifer's already there helping with the decorations? Mike, you need to come over, now, bring a strong drink." The tone in her voice made my hands still on the lights. Liz wasn't the dramatic type. She was the steady one, the voice of reason in our family. If she sounded shaken, something was seriously wrong. "What's going on?" "Just come. And Mike, come alone. Don't bring Jennifer." The line went quiet. I stared at the phone, then at the tangled mess in my hands. Something cold settled in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't name but recognized all the same. I dropped the lights and headed for my truck. The drive to Liz's house took 15 minutes through our small Ohio town, past the strip malls and chain restaurants that defined our corner of the Midwest. I'd built half the electrical systems in these buildings through my contracting company, Mitchell Electric. Nothing fancy, but it kept food on the table and a roof over our heads. Not good enough for Jennifer anymore, apparently. Liz's house sat in the newer development on the east side of town, where the doctors and lawyers lived. Paul's insurance agency had done well over the years, well enough to afford the kind of life Jennifer clearly preferred. I found Liz sitting at her kitchen island, staring at a phone like it might explode. Her face was pale, her usually perfect hair disheveled. "Whose phone is that?" I asked, settling onto the stool across from her. "Jennifer's. She left it here yesterday when she was helping with the kids. It kept buzzing, so I picked it up to call her." Liz looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Pity. "Mike, it wasn't locked." My mouth went dry. "And?" "I saw the message preview. From Paul. I shouldn't have looked, but..." She pushed the phone toward me. "There are hundreds of them." I stared at the device like it was a snake. Part of me wanted to push it back, to walk out of that kitchen and pretend this conversation never happened. But the larger part, the part that had been feeling like a stranger in my own home for months, needed to know. I picked up the phone and opened the messages. The first one I saw made my vision blur. "Can't wait until Mike leaves for work tomorrow. Your bed or mine?" I scrolled up, then down. Message after message going back months, years. Explicit details about their encounters, mocking references to me, plans for when they could meet next, photos I never wanted to see, references to holiday quickies while I was home watching football, thinking my wife was being helpful. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. About 10 minutes longer than you? Liz reached across and took my hand. Mike, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I kept scrolling. The messages painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on under my nose for over 2 years. Worse, they revealed a level of contempt for me that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Look at this one, I said, reading aloud. Mike's working late again. Poor guy thinks he's providing for his family. If only he knew his wife was getting better service elsewhere. Liz winced. Stop reading them. But I couldn't stop. Each message was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, another confirmation that I'd been living a lie. The woman I'd trusted, the man I'd called brother, had been laughing at me behind my back while I paid the bills and played the fool. Where are they now? I asked. Paul took the kids to his mother's for the weekend. Jennifer said she was going home to cook dinner for you. I looked at the timestamp on the last message. Sent 20 minutes ago. Mike's truck isn't in the driveway. Coast is clear. The cold feeling in my stomach turned to something else, something darker. I need to go, I said, standing up. Mike, don't do anything stupid. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd just had her own world shattered and managed a smile that felt like broken glass. Stupid? Sis, I've been stupid for 2 years. Time to get smart. I pocketed Jennifer's phone and headed for the door. The drive to Paul's house took 5 minutes. 5 minutes to plan what I was going to say, what I was going to do. By the time I pulled into his driveway behind Jennifer's car, I'd settled on something simple. I walked to the front door and knocked. No answer, but I could hear voices inside. Laughter. I tried the handle. Unlocked. The voices were coming from upstairs. I didn't need to see what was happening up there. The messages had painted that picture clearly enough. Instead, I walked to Paul's home office and found a piece of paper and a pen. I wrote, "Happy holidays, I know. Mike." I left the note on Paul's desk where he'd be sure to find it, then walked back outside. Jennifer's car sat next to Paul's new BMW, both vehicles representing everything I apparently wasn't good enough to provide. I looked around the neighborhood. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people minded their own business and kept their secrets behind closed doors. I walked to my truck and pulled out my utility knife. The BMW's tires were expensive, the kind Paul had bragged about at family dinners. They made a satisfying hiss as the air escaped. All 4 tires. Because if you're going to send a message, you might as well make it clear. I was back in my truck and halfway down the street when my phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Working late tonight, honey. Don't wait up." I almost laughed. Even now, even with her phone in my pocket containing enough evidence to end our marriage, she was lying to me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "You might want to check your driveway and your marriage." A concerned neighbor. I stared at the message, realizing someone had seen me at Paul's house. Someone with a camera, probably. In this day and age, everyone was watching everyone else. Good. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when you push a man too far. I drove home and parked in my driveway, looking up at the house I'd worked so hard to maintain. The Christmas lights lay abandoned on the porch, still tangled, still broken. Somehow, that seemed appropriate. Inside, Emma was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in. "Where's Mom?" "Working late," I said, using Jennifer's own words. "She won't be home for a while." Emma shrugged and went back to her phone. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey, then sat at the table and pulled out Jennifer's phone. I had some reading to do. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the messages I was reading. Sitting in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I knew, I scrolled through 2 years of betrayal laid out in digital black and white. The worst part wasn't the explicit details or the planning of their encounters. It was the casual cruelty, the way they discussed me like I was some pathetic obstacle to their happiness. Mike so clueless. read one message from Jennifer. He actually thanked me for spending so much time helping with your kids. If only he knew what kind of help I was really providing. Paul's response. Guy works his ass off to pay for a life his wife doesn't even want. Almost feel sorry for him. Almost. I set the phone down and refilled my glass. Through the kitchen window, I could see the neighbors' houses, their warm lights and normal lives. Had they known? Had everyone known except me? My phone rang. Liz. How are you holding up? She asked. About as well as you'd expect. Where are you? Driving around. I can't go back to that house right now, knowing what happened there. Her voice cracked slightly. Mike, what are we going to do? I don't know about you, but I'm going to make sure they understand what they've lost. Don't do anything that'll land you in trouble. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Trouble? Sis, I've been in trouble for 2 years. I just didn't know it. After I hung up, I went back to Jennifer's phone. The messages revealed a pattern that made my stomach churn. Every holiday, every family gathering, every time Jennifer had volunteered to help with Paul and Liz's kids, it had been a cover for their affair. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Liz is so grateful for your help with the turkey. She has no idea you're the one getting stuffed. Christmas morning last year. Mike's downstairs playing Santa. Wanna unwrap your real present? Easter dinner. Family gatherings are so much more fun when you have a secret. Each message was a dagger, but they also revealed something else. Paul and Jennifer had gotten careless, overconfident. They documented everything, thinking they were untouchable. They were wrong. I heard Jennifer's car in the driveway around 11. I was still sitting in the kitchen, her phone face down on the table beside my empty glass. She came through the back door, humming some tune, looking relaxed and satisfied. You're up late, she said, hanging her coat on the hook by the door. I thought you'd be asleep by now. Couldn't sleep. How was work? She moved to the refrigerator, her back to me. Busy night. We had that big project deadline, you know how it is. The lie came so easily, so naturally. How many times had she practiced this routine? Jennifer. Something in my tone made her turn around. For the first time, she really looked at me, saw the empty glass, the phone on the table. Is that my phone? You left it at Liz's yesterday. She asked me to bring it back to you. Jennifer's eyes flicked to the phone, then back to my face. I watched her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew. Did you look at it? What do you think? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see the exact moment she realized her world was about to collapse. Her face went white, then flushed red. Mike, I can explain. No. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. You can't explain 2 years of lying. You can't explain turning my sister's house into your personal motel. You can't explain making me look like a fool in front of everyone I care about. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. It's worse than what I think. I picked up her phone and held it out. Take it. Go through those messages and tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you haven't been screwing my brother-in-law while I was working to pay for the life you obviously don't want. Jennifer's hands shook as she took the phone. She didn't try to unlock it, didn't try to deny what was there. How long have you known? She whispered. Since this afternoon. Liz found out the same time I did. Congratulations, Jennifer. You didn't just destroy our marriage. You destroyed hers too. That seemed to hit her harder than anything else I'd said. She sank into the chair across from me, the phone clutched in her hands like evidence at a trial. I never meant for Liz to get hurt. But you meant for me to get hurt. No. I mean, it just happened. Paul was going through a rough patch with Liz, and I was feeling neglected. Neglected? The word came out louder than I intended. I work 60 hours a week to keep this family afloat. I pay for Emma's school, your car, this house, your clothes, your nights out with friends. What exactly did I neglect? It's not about money, Mike. It's about attention, about feeling wanted, about being with someone who sees me as more than just a wife and mother. So you decided to be someone else's wife and mother instead? The cruelty of that observation hit home. I watched Jennifer crumble, watched 22 years of marriage dissolve in real time. What happens now? She asked. Now? Now you pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay. Tonight. Mike, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. There's no we anymore, Jennifer. There hasn't been for 2 years. I was just too stupid to realize it. She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes they've lost everything that mattered. But I felt nothing. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to fix this, had been beaten out of me by months of lies and humiliation. What about Emma? What about her? You think she doesn't know something's wrong? You think she hasn't figured out why her mother spends every holiday somewhere else? I leaned forward. Emma told me today that you go to Liz's to escape this dump. Your own daughter knows you don't want to be here. Jennifer's crying intensified, but I wasn't done. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack enough clothes for a few days. You're going to find a hotel or stay with one of your friends, the ones who probably already know about your affair. And tomorrow, you're going to call a lawyer. Mike, I'm not finished. My voice was steady now, cold. You're also going to figure out how to explain to Emma why her family is falling apart. Because I'm not covering for you anymore. I'm not making excuses for why mommy's never home. I'm done being your safety net while you screw around with my family. She stood up slowly, like an old woman. I'll need some time to find a place. You had 2 years to think about where you'd go when this fell apart. Figure it out. After she left, the house felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful. More like the silence after an explosion, when you're still waiting to see what's left standing. I walked to the living room and looked out the front window. The Christmas lights were still tangled on the porch, a perfect metaphor for the mess my life had become. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Saw the show at Paul's house today. Tires are expensive. Hope it was worth it. I stared at the message, realizing my afternoon visit hadn't gone unnoticed. Someone had been watching, recording, probably spreading the story around town already. In a place like this, gossip traveled faster than the internet. Good. Let them talk. Let them all know what Paul and Jennifer had done. Let them see what happens when you betray the wrong person. I poured another drink and settled into my chair. Tomorrow, I'd start putting the pieces of my life back together. Tonight, I was going to plan exactly how I was going to make sure Paul and Jennifer understood the full cost of their betrayal. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn that I played by different rules. I woke up on the couch with a headache and the taste of regret in my mouth. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, illuminating the empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table. For a moment, I hoped the previous night had been some alcohol-fueled nightmare. Then I saw Jennifer's wedding ring on the table beside the bottle. Emma's footsteps on the stairs reminded me that life goes on, even when your world collapses. She appeared in the doorway, dressed for school, looking around the room with the calculating eyes of a teenager who'd grown up in a house full of unspoken tension. Where's Mom? She's staying somewhere else for a while. Emma's expression didn't change. No surprise, no shock, just a slight nod, like I'd confirmed something she'd already figured out. Are you getting divorced? The directness of the question caught me off guard. When had my 16-year-old become so matter-of-fact about family destruction? Probably. Good. Maybe now you'll both stop pretending everything's fine. She grabbed her backpack and headed for the door, pausing only to add, "There's coffee in the kitchen. You look like you need it." After she left, I sat in the silence of my empty house and tried to figure out what came next. The smart thing would be to call a lawyer, start the divorce proceedings, try to salvage what I could from the wreckage. The right thing would be to focus on Emma, make sure she got through this without too much damage. But I wasn't feeling smart or right. I was feeling angry. My phone rang. Liz. How did it go last night? She's gone, staying in a hotel, I think. And Paul? I realized I hadn't heard from my brother-in-law yet. No angry calls about his tires, no demands for explanations. Either he hadn't found my note yet, or he was planning his own response. Haven't heard from him. How are you doing? I've been better. The kids are asking questions I don't know how to answer. Liz's voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion underneath. Mike, we need to be smart about this. Don't give them any ammunition to use against us. What do you mean? I mean, slashing tires isn't going to help your case in divorce court. I'd forgotten about the neighbor's text, the implication that someone had recorded my little act of vandalism. In a town this size, gossip was currency, and I'd just given everyone something to talk about. You're right. I'll be more careful. Good. Because I want them to pay for what they did, but I want to do it legally. After I hung up, I showered and dressed for work. Mitchell Electric wasn't going to run itself, and I had employees depending on me. Plus, work had always been my refuge, the one place where I felt competent and in control. That illusion lasted about an hour. I was reviewing job schedules when my office manager, Carol, knocked on my door. She was a motherly woman in her 50s who'd been with the company for 10 years and knew everything that happened in town. Mike, I hate to bother you, but I thought you should know. People are talking. About what? Carol's expression was sympathetic but uncomfortable. About Jennifer and Paul Morrison, and about what happened at his house yesterday. I set down my coffee cup carefully. What exactly are people saying? That you found out about the affair and went over there to confront them. That you damaged his car. She paused. That there's video. My stomach dropped. Video? The Hendersons live across the street from Paul. They have one of those doorbell cameras. Word is, they caught you slashing his tires. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. The Hendersons were retired busybodies who knew everyone's business. If they had video of me vandalizing Paul's car, it would be all over town by lunch. Has anyone seen this video? Not yet, but Tom Henderson was at the diner this morning, telling anyone who'd listen about the excitement on his street yesterday. Carol sat down across from my desk. Mike, what's your plan here? My plan? You're not the first man to get cheated on, and you won't be the last. But you're a business owner in a small town. Your reputation matters. Not just for you, but for everyone who works here. She was right, of course. Mitchell Electric employed 12 people, and their livelihoods depended on our reputation in the community. If I became the crazy guy who went around destroying property, it would hurt more than just me. What do you suggest? Get ahead of the story. Control the narrative before it controls you. I spent the morning thinking about Carol's advice while trying to focus on work. But concentration was impossible. Every phone call could be a customer canceling a job. Every look from my employees could be judgment or pity. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. We need to talk. Meet me at Rosie's Diner at 1. Rosie's Diner was the gossip central of our town, the place where everyone went to see and be seen. If Jennifer wanted to meet there, she was either incredibly naive or playing some kind of game. I arrived first and chose a corner booth where I could see the entire restaurant. Rosie's was busy with the lunch crowd, and I noticed more than a few curious glances in my direction. Word was definitely out. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes late, looking like she'd slept as poorly as I had. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She slid into the booth across from me without making eye contact. Thank you for coming. What do you want, Jennifer? I want to fix this. I want to save our marriage. The words hung between us like a bad joke. I looked around the diner, noting how many people were pretending not to watch our conversation. You picked an interesting place for this discussion. I thought if we met in public, you'd be less likely to make a scene. Like the scene I made at Paul's house yesterday? Jennifer's face flushed. That was unnecessary, Mike. Destructive and childish. Childish? I kept my voice low, but the anger was building. You spend 2 years lying to me, humiliating me, destroying our family, and I'm childish for slashing some tires? You could be arrested for that. And you could be divorced for adultery. Seems like we both have problems. The waitress approached our table, clearly hoping to overhear something juicy. I ordered coffee and waited until she left before continuing. Here's what I don't understand, Jennifer. You had every opportunity to leave. If you were so unhappy, so neglected, why not just ask for a divorce? Why the elaborate deception? Because I didn't want to hurt you. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. You didn't want to hurt me, so you decided to humiliate me instead? You turned my sister's house into your personal playground, made me look like a fool in front of my own family, and that was supposed to be less hurtful than an honest conversation. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every text message, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and told me you were helping with the kids. Those were choices, Jennifer. Deliberate, calculated choices. She started crying again, but this time it felt performative. We were in public, after all, and tears always played well with an audience. What do you want from me, Mike? I've apologized. I've admitted I was wrong. What more can I do? You can stop pretending this was some momentary lapse in judgment. You can stop acting like you're the victim here. I leaned forward. And you can stop insulting my intelligence by suggesting we can just go to counseling and pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. So that's it? 22 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. I stood up and dropped a $10 bill on the table. Call a lawyer, Jennifer. Figure out what you want from the divorce, because this marriage is over. As I walked toward the door, I heard her call out, Mike, please! But I didn't turn around. I was done being the reasonable one, the understanding husband who made excuses for his wife's behavior. If Jennifer wanted a fight, she'd get one. But it would be on my terms. Outside the diner, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. David Chen had handled my business legal work for years, but I knew he also did family law. David? It's Mike Mitchell. I need to discuss a divorce. The conversation was brief and professional. David could see me tomorrow morning to discuss my options. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. For 2 years, Jennifer and Paul had been writing the story of my life without my knowledge. They'd made me a character in their drama, the clueless husband who worked while his wife played. That story was over. Time to start writing a new one. David Chen's law office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house on Main Street, the kind of place that tried to project both success and small-town accessibility. I'd been there before for business contracts, but never for anything this personal. David was younger than me by about 5 years, sharp-suited and sharp-minded, with the kind of confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. He listened to my story without interruption, taking notes on a legal pad and occasionally nodding. How long do you think the affair has been going on? He asked when I finished. Based on the text messages, at least 2 years, maybe longer. And you have copies of these messages? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd taken of Jennifer's phone. David studied them with professional detachment, though I caught him wincing at some of the more explicit content. This is good evidence for adultery, but Ohio is a no-fault divorce state. The affair won't necessarily impact the financial settlement. What about custody? That's more complicated. Courts generally don't consider adultery when determining custody unless it directly impacts the child's welfare. David set down his pen. Mike, I have to ask, What are your goals here? What does winning look like to you? It was a fair question, and one I'd been wrestling with since yesterday. What did I want? Jennifer out of my life, obviously. But beyond that, I want people to know the truth. I want them to understand what she did, what they both did. And I want to make sure Emma doesn't get caught in the crossfire. Those are reasonable goals. But I need you to understand something. Divorce proceedings can get ugly, especially when there's been infidelity. If you want to keep this civil for Emma's sake, you might have to accept some compromises. What kind of compromises? Jennifer will likely be entitled to spousal support, at least temporarily. She'll want half the marital assets, including equity in your business, and she'll fight for joint custody. The thought of Jennifer getting half of everything I'd built made my jaw clench. She gets to cheat for 2 years and still walk away with half my life? That's how the law works. Marriage is considered a partnership, regardless of how it ends. I left David's office with a stack of paperwork and a clearer understanding of just how expensive Jennifer's betrayal was going to be. But I also had something else. A plan. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Emma and I navigated our new normal with the awkward politeness of roommates. She didn't ask about Jennifer, and I didn't volunteer information. We were both waiting to see how this would play out. Jennifer, meanwhile, was staying at the Hampton Inn on the edge of town, according to Emma. She'd called several times, asking to come by and pick up more clothes, but I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The town gossip mill was working overtime. Carol kept me updated on the various theories circulating about my marriage, most of which were surprisingly accurate. Small towns were like that. Secrets were rare, and when they emerged, everyone felt entitled to an opinion. On Thursday evening, I was reviewing job estimates when my phone rang. Paul Morrison's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. What could he possibly have to say that I wanted to hear? But curiosity won out. Mike. His voice was carefully controlled, like he was reading from a script. We need to talk. Do we? Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But we're family, and we need to figure out how to handle this situation. Family. The word was like acid in my mouth. We stopped being family when you started screwing my wife. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Paul. You made a choice. Every time you touched her, every time you lied to Liz, every time you looked me in the eye at a family dinner knowing what you'd done, those were choices. There was a long pause. When Paul spoke again, his voice had lost some of its composure. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? Just a little adultery? Just enough betrayal to spice up your boring marriage? That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about me working overtime to pay for family vacations while you were planning how to use them as opportunities to cheat. Let's talk about me thanking you for being such a good brother-in-law while you were destroying my marriage. Mike, please. We need to think about the kids. Emma and my boys. They don't deserve to have their family torn apart because of our mistakes. Your mistakes. And you should have thought about the kids before you decided to turn family gatherings into your personal dating service. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking with anger, but also with something else. For the first time since this started, Paul had sounded desperate, worried, like maybe he was starting to understand the consequences of his actions. Good. Let him worry. Friday brought news that changed everything. Carol knocked on my office door around 10 in the morning, looking more serious than usual. Mike, you need to see this. She handed me her phone, open to the local Facebook group that served as the town's unofficial news source. Someone had posted a video with the caption, "When you find out your neighbor's been busy." The video was security camera footage from the Hendersons' doorbell, showing me walking up to Paul's BMW and methodically slashing all 4 tires. The quality was surprisingly clear, leaving no doubt about what I was doing or who was doing it. The post had been up for less than an hour and already had dozens of comments. Most were supportive. Apparently, the details of Jennifer and Paul's affair had made the rounds, and public opinion was on my side. But a few criticized my actions, calling them juvenile or criminal. "How many people have seen this?" I asked. "It's been shared about 50 times already. By lunch, half the town will have watched it." I stared at the video, watching myself commit what was technically vandalism. In the moment, it had felt like justice. Now it just looked petty. "Has Paul seen it?" I'd assume so. Someone tagged him in the comments. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Paul again. "You've really done it now," he said without preamble. "That video is everywhere. People are calling me, asking if I'm going to press charges." "Are you?" "I should. Destruction of property, trespassing. David Henderson says he'll testify that you were on my property without permission. Go ahead. Press charges. Let's make this as public as possible." The threat seemed to catch him off guard. "What?" "You heard me. Call the police. File a report. Let's get this whole story out in the open. I'm sure the investigating officer will be very interested in why I was angry enough to slash your tires." There was a long silence. Paul was smart enough to realize that involving the police would mean involving Jennifer, and that would mean their affair becoming part of an official record. "Mike, this doesn't have to escalate. It already has escalated. The moment you decided to betray your wife and destroy my marriage, this became a war. The only question now is how much collateral damage you're willing to accept. What do you want?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? An apology that could never undo the damage? "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to experience even a fraction of the humiliation you put me through. And I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of man you really are." "And then what? We all just live here together, pretending this never happened?" "I don't know, Paul. You should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair with my wife." I hung up and looked at Carol, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation with obvious concern. "You know he could still press charges," she said. "Let him. At this point, I'm not sure I care." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. I did care. I cared about my business, my employees, my daughter. I cared about not becoming the cautionary tale people told about men who lost everything because they couldn't control their anger. The problem was, I also cared about making sure Paul and Jennifer understood that betraying me had been the biggest mistake of their lives, and those two goals might not be compatible. The weekend brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the garage, organizing tools and trying to keep my mind occupied, when Emma appeared in the doorway. "Mom's here," she said. "She wants to talk to you." Through the garage window, I could see Jennifer's car in the driveway. She was sitting behind the wheel, staring at the house like she was gathering courage. "Tell her I'm busy." "Dad." Emma's voice had a tone I rarely heard from her, serious, almost adult. "You guys need to figure this out. This whole thing is getting weird." "Weird how?" "Kids at school are talking about it, sharing that video, making jokes. Yesterday, someone asked me if you were going to slash their dad's tires next." The thought that Emma was dealing with social fallout from my actions hit me harder than any threat Paul could make. I'd been so focused on my own anger that I hadn't considered how this was affecting her. "I'm sorry, Em. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't. And neither did Mom. You're both so busy being mad at each other that you forgot other people live in this house too." She was right, of course. 16 years old, and she was the most mature person in the family. "Tell your mother I'll be in a minute." Jennifer was waiting in the kitchen, looking nervous and tired. She'd lost weight in the past week, and her clothes hung loose on her frame. "Thank you for seeing me. Emma made a good point about needing to figure this out. What do you want to discuss?" "The video. People are talking, Mike. Not just about what you did, but about everything. The affair, the divorce, all of it. It's becoming a spectacle." And whose fault is that? Both of ours, probably. But we need to think about Emma. She shouldn't have to deal with this becoming the town's entertainment. I poured myself coffee and didn't offer her any. What do you suggest? We handle this quietly, privately. No more public confrontations, no more property damage. We get divorced like adults and try to minimize the damage to everyone else. Everyone else? You mean like your boyfriend? Jennifer's face flushed. Paul and I, that's over. Liz threw him out yesterday. He's staying at his brother's place in Columbus. This was news. I'd heard through the gossip network that Liz had filed for divorce, but I hadn't known Paul was gone. So now that your affair has blown up both marriages, you want to handle things quietly? I want to stop hurting people. Emma, Liz's kids, your employees who are getting questions about whether their boss is stable. That last comment stung because it was true. Carol had mentioned that a couple of clients had called with concerns about my recent behavior. In a small town, your personal life and professional reputation were inseparable. Fine. What are you proposing? We agree on custody and support terms without going to court. We divide the assets fairly. We both commit to keeping Emma out of the middle of this. And in exchange? In exchange, you stop trying to destroy Paul's life. Stop posting about the affair online. Stop vandalizing his property. Stop turning this into a public war. I hadn't been posting online. That was other people sharing the security camera video and discussing the situation. But I understood her point. What makes you think I have any interest in protecting Paul? Because you're not a cruel person, Mike. Angry, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But you're not someone who destroys people for sport. She was wrong about that. Over the past week, I'd discovered a capacity for cruelty I didn't know I possessed. The thought of Paul losing his business, his reputation, his place in the community didn't bother me at all. But Emma's words echoed in my mind. This was getting weird, affecting people who didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. I'll consider it, I said finally. But I want something in return. What? I want the truth, all of it. How long the affair really lasted, how many people knew, whether there were others. I want to know exactly what my life has been for the past few years. Jennifer's face went pale. Mike, those are my terms. Complete honesty, or we do this the hard way in court with lawyers and depositions and public records that anyone can access. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded on the table. When she finally looked up, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Relief. It started 3 years ago, she said quietly. At Emma's birthday party. Paul and I were cleaning up after everyone left, and Liz had gone to put the kids to bed. We were laughing about something, and he kissed me. 3 years. An entire year longer than I'd thought. Go on. It was supposed to be just that once, a mistake, a moment of weakness. But then it happened again at Christmas, and again at Easter. Before we knew it, we were looking for excuses to be alone together. How many people knew? No one, at first. But Paul's secretary figured it out when I started calling the office, and my friend Lisa suspected something. Lisa Warren, Jennifer's best friend since college. They'd worked together at the marketing firm downtown until Lisa left to start her own consulting business. Did Lisa know for sure? She confronted me about 6 months ago, said she could tell something was different about me, that I seemed happier. I denied it, but she didn't believe me. Anyone else? Paul's brother knew something was going on. He made some comments about Paul working late a lot, spending time away from home. But I don't think he knew it was me specifically. I absorbed this information, trying to process the scope of the deception. It wasn't just Jennifer and Paul who'd been lying to me. There was an entire network of people who'd known or suspected, and none of them had said anything. What about the kids? Did Emma know? I don't think so. She knew I was spending a lot of time at Liz's, but she seemed to accept the explanation about helping with childcare. And Paul's boys? They're younger. I don't think they understood what was happening. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 3 years of lies settling between us. Finally, Jennifer spoke again. I know you hate me right now. I know you think I'm a terrible person. But I need you to understand that I never wanted to hurt you. Then why didn't you just leave? Because leaving would have meant admitting I'd made a mistake. Admitting that the life we'd built together wasn't enough for me. It seemed easier to just have both. The honesty was brutal, but I'd asked for it. Jennifer had wanted the security and respectability of our marriage, along with the excitement of her affair. She'd wanted to have her cake and eat it too, as the saying went. Well, now you have neither. I know, and I'm sorry for that. Not just sorry I got caught, but sorry for what I did. Sorry for lying to you. Sorry for betraying Liz. Sorry for putting Emma in this position. Sorry enough to make this easy? What do you mean? I mean, are you sorry enough to accept a settlement that reflects what you did? Or are you going to fight for half of everything, like you're some kind of victim? Jennifer was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'll take whatever you think is fair. Good, because I've got some ideas about what fair looks like. After Jennifer left, I sat in the kitchen and thought about our conversation. She'd given me what I wanted, the truth, or at least a version of it. But knowing the full scope of the betrayal didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me angrier. 3 years of lies. 3 years of family gatherings where I'd played the fool while everyone else knew or suspected what was happening. 3 years of working overtime to support a wife who was getting her real needs met elsewhere. My phone buzzed with a text from Liz. Heard Jennifer was at your place. How did it go? I called her back instead of texting. She answered on the first ring. She told me the truth, I said. 3 years, not 2. And other people knew. I figured it was longer. Looking back, there were signs. Times when Paul was evasive about where he'd been, when Jennifer seemed different at family events. Are you okay? I'm angry, hurt, embarrassed that I didn't see what was happening in my own house. Liz paused. But I'm also relieved it's over. Living with someone who's lying to you every day. You can feel it, even when you can't prove it. What happens now? Now we rebuild. Both of us. We figure out how to be single again, how to co-parent with people we don't trust, how to face this town knowing everyone's talking about us. Any regrets about how we handled it? You mean your tire-slashing adventure? Liz laughed, but there was no humor in it. Part of me wishes I'd thought of it first. After we hung up, I walked through my house, really seeing it for the first time in weeks. This was my home, the place I'd worked so hard to maintain and improve. Jennifer had lived here for 22 years, but it had never really been hers. She'd always been looking for something else, somewhere else, someone else. Well, now she could look all she wanted, just not here. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning in December, exactly 1 month after I'd discovered Jennifer's affair. David Chen had drawn up an agreement that was more generous than I felt like being, but fair enough to avoid a court battle. Jennifer would get spousal support for 2 years, enough to get back on her feet, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. She'd get her car, her personal belongings, and a small settlement from our savings. I'd keep the house, the business, and primary custody of Emma. She signed without any changes, David told me over the phone. I have to say, I'm surprised. Most people in her position would have fought for more. Maybe she really is sorry. Or maybe she knows this is better than what she'd get if all those text messages became part of the public record. Probably both, I thought. Jennifer was many things, but she wasn't stupid. She understood that her bargaining position was weak. The town had moved on to other gossip, though our situation still came up in conversations. The security camera video had been viewed hundreds of times before the Hendersons finally took it down, and it had become something of a local legend. Paul, meanwhile, had essentially disappeared. His insurance agency was still operating, but he was working from the Columbus office and rarely came back to town. Word was that Liz's divorce settlement had been brutal. She'd gotten the house, full custody of their boys, and a significant chunk of his business assets. "Good," Emma had said when I told her about Paul's situation. "He deserves it." My daughter had surprised me throughout this whole ordeal. I'd expected her to be angry, confused, maybe blame me for breaking up the family. Instead, she'd shown a maturity that made me proud and sad at the same time. "I knew something was wrong," she told me one evening as we sat in the living room, finally watching TV together like a normal family. "Mom was always distracted, always somewhere else mentally even when she was here, and she was mean to you in little ways that I don't think she even realized." "Mean how?" "Like she'd roll her eyes when you told stories at dinner, or she'd make comments about your clothes, your truck, the way you ate, little digs that added up over time. I hadn't noticed, or maybe I'd trained myself not to notice." But Emma was right. The disrespect had been there long before I'd discovered the affair. "Are you okay with how things turned out?" I asked. "I'm okay with you being happy again. You smile now, Dad. You didn't smile much before." It was true. Despite everything that had happened, despite the anger and humiliation and financial stress, I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant tension of living with someone who didn't want to be there was gone. Christmas came and went quietly. Emma and I decorated the tree together, using lights I'd finally managed to untangle, and spent the day watching movies and eating too much food. Jennifer called in the morning to talk to Emma, but kept the conversation brief. She wanted to know if she could come by and see me open presents, Emma told me after hanging up. I told her maybe next year, when things aren't so weird. "You don't have to choose sides, Em. She's still your mother." "I know, but she made her choices, and now I get to make mine." The week between Christmas and New Year's brought an unexpected phone call. Lisa Warren, Jennifer's former best friend and one of the people who'd known about the affair. "Mike, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I think we should talk." "About what?" "About what really happened. About things Jennifer probably didn't tell you." We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, away from the usual gossip networks. Lisa looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse and avoiding eye contact. "I should have said something sooner," she began. "About Jennifer and Paul. I knew it was wrong, knew it was hurting you and Liz. But Jennifer begged me not to say anything." "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I found out it wasn't just Paul." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "There was someone else. Before Paul, and maybe during. Jennifer was having an affair with her boss, Richard Caldwell, at the marketing firm. Richard Caldwell was a divorced man in his 50s who owned the agency where Jennifer had worked until recently. I'd met him at a few company parties over the years. Smooth, charming, the type who probably had affairs with half his female employees. "How long?" "About a year, maybe more. It ended when Richard started dating someone seriously, and that's when Jennifer got involved with Paul." "Did Paul know about Richard?" "I don't think so. Jennifer was good at compartmentalizing her life." I sat back in my chair, trying to process this new information. It wasn't just 3 years of betrayal. It was 4, maybe 5. Multiple affairs, multiple lies, multiple levels of deception I'd never suspected. "Why are you telling me this?" Lisa finally looked at me directly. "Because Jennifer's been telling people that the affair with Paul was a one-time mistake, that she was going through a rough patch and made a bad decision. She's painting herself as the victim of circumstances, rather than someone who made deliberate choices over and over again. And you don't think that's fair? I think you deserve to know the truth. All of it. And I think people should understand what kind of person they're feeling sorry for." After Lisa left, I sat in my truck in the coffee shop parking lot, staring at nothing. Part of me wished she hadn't told me. The knowledge that Jennifer had been systematically cheating on me for years didn't change the outcome, We were still getting divorced, I was still rebuilding my life, but it made the betrayal feel deeper. My phone rang. Liz. How are you doing with the holidays? Better than expected. Emma and I are figuring things out. Good. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. Paul's been calling, wanting to see the boys. I've been saying no, but he's threatening to get lawyers involved. Will you let him? Eventually, probably. They're his sons, and they miss him. But not yet. Not until I'm sure he understands that his actions have consequences. Speaking of consequences, I just learned something interesting about Jennifer. I told her about my conversation with Lisa, about the affair with Richard Caldwell. Liz listened without interrupting, though I could hear her sharp intake of breath when I mentioned there had been multiple affairs. I'm sorry, Mike. I know this doesn't make it easier. Actually, it does in a weird way. It confirms that this wasn't about me, wasn't about anything I did or didn't do. Jennifer is just someone who cheats. It's who she is. What are you going to do with this information? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to let it go, focus on moving forward. But another part of me thinks people should know what they're dealing with. Be careful. You're in a good place right now. Don't let anger drag you back into the mess. She was right, of course. I'd worked hard to get to a place where I could sleep at night, where I could focus on Emma and the business and building a new life. Reopening old wounds might not be worth it. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jennifer was getting away with something. She'd destroyed 2 marriages, hurt multiple children, and betrayed everyone who'd trusted her. And now she was rewriting history to make herself look like a victim of circumstance rather than the architect of the destruction. That didn't sit right with me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. Jennifer wanted to control the narrative, wanted people to see her affair as a momentary lapse in judgment rather than a pattern of deception and betrayal. Fine. But if she was going to tell her story, I was going to tell mine, and my story included all the facts. New Year's Eve found me at Murphy's Bar, the local dive where I'd been spending more evenings lately. Not drinking heavily, I'd learned that lesson, but enjoying the company of people who didn't know or care about my personal drama. Murphy's was the kind of place where blue-collar workers went to decompress, where conversations stayed surface level and everyone minded their own business. The owner, Sean Murphy, was an ex-boxer who'd run the place for 20 years and had a strict policy about keeping drama at the door. "You look like a man with something on his mind," Sean said, refilling my beer without being asked. "Just thinking about the year that was. Hell of a year for you, but you seem to be handling it better than most would." Sean had heard the story, of course. Everyone in town had. But he'd never offered unsolicited advice or prying questions, which I appreciated. "Can I ask you something, Sean?" "Shoot." "If someone wronged you, really wronged you, and they were trying to rewrite history to make themselves look better, would you set the record straight?" Sean considered this while wiping down glasses. "Depends. Would setting the record straight help you move on, or would it keep you stuck in the past? That's what I'm trying to figure out. My experience? The truth has a way of coming out eventually. Question is whether you want to be the one telling it, or whether you want to let it surface on its own." Before I could respond, the bar door opened, and Paul Morrison walked in. He looked around nervously, spotted me at the bar, and approached like a man walking to his execution. "Mike, can we talk?" Sean raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The few other patrons glanced over with interest, then went back to their drinks. "What do you want, Paul?" "I want to apologize. Properly. Without lawyers or family members or anyone else involved." "You drove back from Columbus to apologize?" "I drove back because I can't live with myself anymore. Because what I did to you, to Liz, to our kids, it's eating me alive." Paul looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. Whatever he'd been going through since the affair came to light, It wasn't going well. I'm listening. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go as far as it did. It started as just, I don't know, attention. Jennifer was lonely, I was feeling unappreciated at home, and we were spending all this time together during family events. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to be selfish. I decided that what I wanted was more important than my marriage, your marriage, our families. And I've been paying for that decision ever since. Sean had moved to the other end of the bar, giving us privacy while staying close enough to intervene if things got heated. What do you want from me, Paul? Forgiveness? Absolution? I want you to know that I understand what I cost you. Not just your marriage, but your trust in people, your sense of security, your place in your own family. I took all of that away from you, and I'm sorry. The apology was more complete than anything Jennifer had offered, but it didn't change anything. Sorry didn't undo 3 years of betrayal. Sorry didn't give me back the time I'd spent working late while my wife was with another man. Apology noted, I said finally. Anything else? Liz won't let me see my boys. I know I don't have the right to ask, but could you talk to her? Tell her I'm trying to make this right? You want me to help you get access to your kids after you destroyed their family? I want my sons to know their father, even if their father made terrible mistakes. I studied Paul's face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity. What I saw instead was genuine remorse and desperation. He really was suffering, really did understand what he'd lost. I'll think about it, I said. But Paul, if you ever contact Jennifer again, if you ever try to restart what you had, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. It's over between us, has been since everything came out. Good, because I recently learned some interesting things about your girlfriend's history, things that might change how people see this whole situation. Paul's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean, Jennifer didn't just cheat with you. You weren't her first affair, and maybe not her only one during the time you were together. That's not… She wouldn't… She would, and she did. The question is, did she tell you about Richard Caldwell, about the year-long affair she had with her boss before she moved on to you? Paul's expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that might have been relief. She said I was the only one, that what we had was special. What you had was convenient. You were available, you were family, so no one would suspect, and you were married, so you couldn't make demands she wasn't willing to meet. I watched Paul process this information, watched him realize that he'd been as manipulated as I had. Jennifer hadn't chosen him because he was special, or because they had some great love affair. She'd chosen him because he was easy. I need to go, Paul said, standing abruptly. Thank you for telling me. After he left, Sean approached with a fresh beer I hadn't ordered. That was either very kind or very cruel, he said. Maybe both. You feel better? I considered the question. Did I feel better? Paul's apology had been genuine, and his reaction to learning about Jennifer's other affairs had been satisfying in a petty way. But mostly, I just felt tired. I feel like I'm ready to move on. That's something, I guess. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and a decision made. I called Lisa Warren. I've been thinking about our conversation, I said when she answered. About Jennifer's affair with Richard Caldwell. Have you decided what you want to do with that information? I've decided to let it go. Jennifer's not my problem anymore. If people want to believe her version of events, that's their choice. Really? You're not going to set the record straight? The record is straight enough. Everyone knows she cheated. Everyone knows she lied. Everyone knows she destroyed 2 marriages. The details don't matter anymore. You're a better person than I am. I want to scream the truth from the rooftops. Then do it. But I'm done fighting Jennifer's battles for her, and I'm done fighting against her too. I've got better things to do with my time. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not happiness exactly, but a calm acceptance of where I was and where I was going. Emma found me in the kitchen making breakfast, something I'd started doing more often since Jennifer left. "You look different this morning," she said, grabbing juice from the refrigerator. "Different how?" "Relaxed, like you finally got a good night's sleep." "I did. First time in a while." "Does this mean you're done being angry at Mom?" I considered the question while flipping pancakes. Was I done being angry? The rage that had consumed me for weeks was gone, replaced by something closer to indifference. "I'm done letting anger run my life. Your mother made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. But I don't need to spend my energy making sure she suffers for them." "Good. Because I was getting worried you were turning into one of those bitter divorced guys who can't talk about anything except how terrible their ex-wife is." "Was I getting that bad?" "You were getting close." We ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, two people who'd survived a family catastrophe and were figuring out how to build something new from the wreckage. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the town in a clean white blanket that made everything look fresh and possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Emma mentioned you're doing better. I'm glad. I know this doesn't change anything, but I really am sorry for what I put you through." I read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. Jennifer was part of my past now, not my future. She could keep her apologies. I had better things to do than look backward. The divorce was finalized on a cold February morning, exactly 3 months after I'd discovered Jennifer's affair. I signed the papers in David Chen's office, officially ending 22 years of marriage with a few strokes of a pen. "How do you feel?" David asked as I handed back the documents. "Free," I said, and realized I meant it. Walking out of the lawyer's office, I felt like I was stepping into a new life. Not the life I'd planned, not the life I'd thought I wanted, but a life that was entirely my own. No more lies, no more betrayal, no more wondering where I stood with the people who were supposed to love me. Emma was waiting in my truck, having skipped school to be with me for the final court appearance. "So it's official?" she asked, as I got behind the wheel. "It's official. Your parents are officially divorced." "And how do you feel about that?" I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, driving through the town that had witnessed my humiliation and my recovery. Past the diner where Jennifer had tried to save our marriage, past Paul's old office, past all the places where my old life had played out. "I feel like the luckiest man alive," I said, finally. "Why?" "Because I found out the truth before it was too late to do something about it. Because I have a daughter who's smart enough to see through the lies and strong enough to handle the consequences. And because I'm 43 years old, with enough time left to build a life I actually want to live." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "So what do we do now?" "Now? Now we go home and figure out what comes next." As we drove through our small Ohio town, past the strip malls and chain restaurants and modest houses where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, I realized that ordinary wasn't such a bad thing. Ordinary meant honest. Ordinary meant real. And after 3 years of living a lie, real was exactly what I needed. The Christmas lights were long gone, packed away until next December. But spring was coming, and with it, the chance to start over, to build something new, something honest, something that belonged entirely to me. I'd been betrayed, humiliated, and nearly destroyed, but I'd survived. More than that, I'd learned who I really was when everything else was stripped away, and that person was stronger than I'd ever imagined.